Thank you, Johnny. So this month our theme is about taking the trek to Bethlehem. And this was a trek that you and I do in our lives right now. This isn't a trek that just happened 2,000 years ago. It's a trek that's happening right now in our individual lives. And in some ways, the Christmas story is actually a template for awakening, for birthing the Christ presence, the Christ spirit, our divine nature within us, because we are coded to awaken, aren't we? We are coded to evolve and to express compassion and loving kindness and to express our divine nature in life. And this is kind of spelled out for us in the Christmas story. Charles Fillmore said this about the process of awakening. The unfoldment of consciousness by Jesus made him God incarnate, because Christ is the mind of God individualized. Whoever so loses his personality as to be swallowed up in God becomes Christ Jesus or God-man or God-woman. So it's not that we cease to be who we are, but we become more of who we are. We become deeper, richer, more fuller expressions of Rafe, of Scott, of Desi. We become more full and complete expressions of the God incarnate. So our story begins when Mary is visited by the angel Gabriel, and he foretells this amazing miracle that is about to happen in her life. And of course, at first she doesn't believe it, does she? And the truth is, this story is about us when we realize that there's more to us than meets the eye, right? There's more to us than the five senses. So remember that for yourself. When was the first time? Perhaps you were a little child, perhaps it happened later in life, but when you realized that there was more to life than the five senses. For each one of us, it happens at a different time, and it can happen in different ways. It can be through great love, the birth of a child, being in nature. It can be through great loss and tragedy, the death of a loved one or an illness. It can come as a result of spiritual practice. And it can come through grace, where it just shows up on its own. So when was that for you? When was that moment when you first started to awaken? Now the thing is, it's not done just once, is it? It's like, okay, I'm awake, now guess what? I fell asleep again, then I wake up again, I fall asleep again, I wake up. Swami Vishnu, when I lived in the yoga ashram, he said it this way. He said, is there not a nobler mission than eating, drinking, and sleeping? Time slips away, kings and barons. Where is Gandhiji? Where is Kennedy? Be up and doing asana and pranayam, and you will attain supreme bliss. So this is our path. This is our road that we are on. This is our trek to Bethlehem. So when we look at the Christmas story, we see this template for us to follow in the process of awakening. So I want to focus, even though we did our candle lighting around the wise men, I actually want to focus on the shepherds this morning, because the shepherds were keeping watch over their flocks by night. And an angel appeared to them and said, peace on earth, goodwill to men. I have good news for you and great joy that to you this day Jesus has been born. So we know, you hear it from me every year, metaphysically, the story of the shepherds is when we keep watch over our thoughts by night, right? Flocks, sheep, they all represent crowds, they all represent our thoughts. And the shepherd's job is to keep track of the sheep. And if one wandered off, well, they'd have to go get it and bring it in, right? And what do we do when we meditate? Don't we gather together our thoughts and we watch our thoughts by night, and then one of the thoughts wanders off, and it's like, okay, I'm going to bring it back. And then another thought wanders off over here, and it's like, okay, I'm going to bring it back to the breath. And so the shepherds keeping watch by night is the process of meditation and silence. But I also think it's the process of embracing and loving all parts of ourselves, including those parts of ourselves that we may want to cast off or project. In November, our theme was embracing the darkness, wasn't it? It was about, because it is getting darker every day, so what else are you going to do? Embrace it, love it. But it's also about embracing those parts of ourselves that we may not like so much, that we want to cast off, that we want to project. Because as we continue to project, chances are we will never experience peace on earth, goodwill toward men and women. Peace on earth, goodwill to all cannot happen unless you and I are peaceful. Unless you and I have it inside of ourselves, that's when it happens. Now, this doesn't mean that we are going to be pleasant all the time, right? It doesn't mean that you never get angry, that you never get depressed, that you never have parts of yourself that you don't like, because how one-dimensional would that be? How boring, how superficial would that be to be pleasant all the time? It does remind me of the movie Pleasantville. It's one of my favorites. Pleasantville is a fictional town, and it is all in black and white. And everybody in the town is pleasant. They're very pleasant. They're very one-dimensional. But as each person in the town starts to claim a part of themselves that they had cast off, they become in color. All of a sudden, they're in color. And the mayor of the town, who was very passive-aggressive, allows himself to finally get angry and yell, and he turns from black and white into color. The sister hated geeks. She hated geeks. She projected onto geeks. She really didn't like them. And until she embraced her inner geek, as soon as she realized that she had a brain and she loved to study and the world wasn't all about boys, she went from this one-dimensional character into 3 dimensions, into this deep and colorful person. Debbie Ford, in her book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, says that we need to embrace again all sides of ourselves. And she said that she really worked hard, really did her spiritual practice, and really worked at being a really kind, good person. And one day she was at a seminar, and in the seminar, the leader asked her to stand up, and she said, and I won't say the word, but it rhymes with B and it rhymes with switch, right? She said, you are a real, and Debbie Ford's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, no, you are a real, and she was like so offended, and she's like, why would you say that? And she said, because I can see it. And she said, and you go out of your way not to be that, don't you? She said, but if you had someone working for you, a contractor, and they didn't do the work, but they kept charging you, what would you do? Would you be that? And she said, well, yes, I would. So it serves you, doesn't it? Well, yes, it does. So there's times when that is something to embrace. She was leading a seminar one day, and there was this woman who was really tough and hated weak people, just hated them. And she stood up and she said, you know what? I think you're a real marshmallow. And this woman was so offended. She's like, what do you mean I'm a marshmallow? How dare you? She said, no, I think inside you're really soft. And the woman started to cry because she really was soft. And yet she disliked, sometimes we even hate that which is in ourselves that we're not embracing and that we're just throwing off, and we're casting it onto other people and sometimes other countries, right? These last couple of weeks, we have seen mass protests around the country because of the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Gardner. And, you know, I think, and I've said this before, I think that we're having sort of a kickback to the 60s, where a lot of the threads that were happening then are being picked up again, only we're in a different place. We have evolved. We're a little better. Because even though we're having protests around the country, many of them are peaceful. I know there has been some that have not been peaceful, but many of them have been peaceful. And I think we've come a long way. When I look back, I mean, my father is a Chicago policeman, and he was at the '68 Democratic Convention. And he warned me 2 days, I was like 15 or something, 14, and he said, if I catch you downtown, I'm going to bust your head open. So just so you know. And, you know, and of course he was right, and it was true. And it was so big, right? It was so violent. And yet we see it, it's not perfect, and it's not done, and it's got a long way to go. And I believe that we are healing it. The truth is, when we heal that inner violence in ourselves and that anger and that rage, then we stop projecting it out. When we heal and embrace the inner racist in ourselves, then we heal it in the outer, and that's how we get peace on earth, goodwill toward all. Because we'll stop projecting the darkness onto others, and we'll love and embrace it in ourselves. 100 years ago today, Pope Benedict suggested that we have a temporary hiatus of war for the celebration of Christmas. This was the Great War, World War I. And of course, everybody said, nope, not going to have it, no truce, nothing. But on Christmas Eve, the Germans and the British were fighting. There were about 100,000 troops. And on Christmas Eve, they stopped fighting. They stopped projecting, because what do you do, especially when you're in a war? My God, it's the enemy, it's the evil one, it's subhuman, and you want to kill it, right? And so in that period, they went into no man's land, and it started with the Germans who were decorating their trenches, and then they started singing Christmas carols in German, and so the British then started singing Christmas carols in English, and eventually they all came together, and they traded cigarettes and souvenirs, buttons and hats, and they talked, and they were peaceful for a whole day. There's a letter that a 19-year-old British soldier wrote to his mother the next morning. He said, "Dear Mother, I am writing from the trenches. It is 11 o'clock in the morning, and beside me is a fire. Opposite me is a dugout with straw in it. The ground is sloppy in the actual trench, but it's frozen everywhere else. In my mouth is a pipe presented by the Princess Mary, and in the pipe is tobacco. Of course you say, so, but wait. In the pipe is German tobacco. Ha, you say, from a prisoner or found in a captured trench. Oh dear, no, from a German soldier. Yes, a live German soldier from his own trench. Yesterday, the British and Germans met and shook hands in the ground between the trenches. And we exchanged souvenirs and shook hands. Yes, all day, Christmas Day, and, as I write, marvelous, isn't it?" Henry Williamson, age 19, London Rifle Brigade. For a moment, they stopped. For a moment, they stopped projecting onto each other evil, enemy, and they stepped out to be peaceful and to see each other as they really are, as humans, as brothers, as fellow soldiers. Now, what's interesting is the powers that be did not like the fact that they did this. Big shocker. Particularly Adolf Hitler, he didn't like it. Oh, that's a surprise. So in the following years of the war, artillery bombardments were ordered on Christmas Eve. and that was to ensure that there were no further lulls in the combat. So it's like you take a step forward sometimes, and then you take 2 steps back, right? But this was 100 years ago, and so we're still kind of maneuvering through this process. But as we awaken, as we birth that inner Christ, as we own and love and embrace all parts of me, then I can own and embrace all parts of you, right? When you embrace and love all parts of you, you can love me. There's no need to project something else onto you that may or may not even be there. So I invite you, as we move into this Christmas season and we'll continue to unpack and explore the Christmas story, remember the first time that you knew that there was more to life than eating, drinking, and sleeping, as much as we may enjoy that. Perhaps it came unbidden as an experience of grace for you. Perhaps it came through great love or great loss. Perhaps it was a result of your spiritual practice. But like Mary, you are now on a trek to Bethlehem, and there is no turning back. A major step in awakening is keeping watch over your thoughts by night through silence and meditation, through loving the inner jerk, the inner mushball, the inner racist, the inner you fill in the blank of what you are, the inner geek, the inner weak person, the inner bully. Because when we become comfortable with who we are, we don't have to project it outward. And life becomes rich with color because we're not one-dimensional beings. We are coded to awaken. Peace on earth, goodwill to all is not just a wish and a prayer. As we birth the Christ and awaken to our divine nature and continue this trek to Bethlehem, peace on earth, goodwill to all is a reality. And it's a reality that we can experience in our lifetime when we own, love, and embrace it all. God bless you all.